Uh, and we're up. Uh, Change the settings. Yeah, it's already open. Share wherever you want.
This one. Okay.
It's already ready.
God, I sound like such an old man. Ugh.
Sound like.
Uh, Robert Reich shares this cartoon of Trump talking to a man, and the man says, "I beg your pardon," and Trump says, "I prefer cash." Yay. Okay. We are talking about light today, specifically just filling in the blanks from the end of what we were talking about before. And specifically, so Hoolgate, in his critical guide, near the end says light can be understood in the philosophy of nature as an observable phenomenon that exhibits logical identity without discrete simple constituents, and that is refracted into qualitatively different colors by a medium such as a prism. Yet it can be further understood in modern physics as radiation consisting of vibrations or waves of the electromagnetic field that propagate in photons, components that are quantitatively distinct from one another, but not wholly discrete and simple in the sense that Hegel rejects. Philosophy and physics, in other words, disclose two different but not incompatible aspects of light, neither of which alone exhaust the character of the latter. And I think this is a very nice summary statement going into the specifics of um, scientific physics gathered and understood through the understanding, as Hegel puts it. Basically, your run of the mill scientist. Um, Anything you'd read in a scientific journal today is pretty much covered by this. Um, the discussion of the metaphysical concept of force in this chapter is quite interesting, as we have already seen, because Hegel rejects it because it's too much like the ether, right? The ether is not an actual thing, even by Hegel's time, but some people still subscribe to it. I think even past Hegel a little bit in
Yeah,
some corners.
20th century, it's the 20th century. Yeah.
Jesus, that's just sad. I'm sorry.
You- Most physicists subscribe to the idea of ether until Einstein says, well, we don't really need ether.
There's also
Yeah,
the famous Knoll experiment result, or whatever it's
Like
referred
with
to.
Morley. Yeah.
Yeah, that showed no evidence of the ether,
Yeah.
not just inconclusive, but straight up disproves it.
yeah. I really liked his description in here where he talked about the electromagnetic field, because I'm a layman, and unless I've read extensively about something, scientific, I don't really get it. But when I read this, it reminded me of all of those explosions in sci-fi movies from like the 2000s on, I guess, where you see an object explode, and instead of it just sort of turning into a puff of dust, it actually releases an electromagnetic wave coming out, propagating, right? And
Oh, yeah.
so, yeah. And so here, Hoolgate says, furthermore, light waves, considered as waves, are not simple and discrete either. For Maxwell, light is the propagation of oscillating electric and magnetic fields through space in the form of an electromagnetic wave. It is not, however, just one uniform wave, but consists of different waves of different frequencies. Yet the latter is propagating electromagnetic fields, albeit ones that propagate in quanta, overlap and therefore, through superposition, act like a single field. So this gets to that explosion I was just talking about. Like when light is released, it's not just light that's released; it's all of the energy from this object is going out to the Earth. It's not just the visible spectrum, but the UV light that you cannot see, but will cook your skin, as well as the what's the other one? Is it the infrared on the other side?
Well,
I forget.
did the
So,
light rays?
well, light rays come with UV rays, come with all the other rays that you
Yeah,
can't
I mean,
see.
in
Some of them
terms
are
of
visible, some of them are not.
the opposite sides of the outside of the visible, just outside of visible spectrum is UV and infrared.
There it is. Thank you. Yes. So, and Hegel's metaphysical category of light here really only covers the, as he says, the observable phenomenon. There are underlying things that Hegel does not rule out. And that's what Houlgate tries to say in this section. Like he doesn't actually rule out things that we cannot see and that science may be able to take up. So he leaves room for them, but he doesn't just let them have free reign. Like if there is an inferior, unsustainable theory of of light as particles in his era, it wasn't up to the standards it is today, and we have to look at his rejection of it in that light, not in the light of he would have rejected particle theory today, right? Because if he was read up on particle theory and even quantum theory today, I think he would absolutely be on point.
Shut
And
up and calculate.
right. Well,
The
that's
opposite
Physics
end.
caught up to physics caught up to Hegel in the 20th century.
Yeah.
well, yeah, like physics today, Hegel, even physics today, Marxists and Hegelians who get this know that science is basic science today is shut up and calculate, the quantitative, and that's the way that we measure the universe. We don't deal with the qualitative very easily, which is basically why the metaphysical side of the science of nature, philosophy of nature, is rejected in many circles. Yeah. So, Kyle, Jim, you read up on this stuff. What are some of your thoughts?
I guess one thing, this is a little more tangential.
Please.
Just on this part here. Well, I was just thinking, because we do in modern physics, and he does talk about, well, I guess Hegel does talk about light and its opposite in dark matter, but this dark matter that is affected by light because it reflects it, which we get the reflection. That's, of course, matter as understood of his time. We have this current conception of dark matter, dark because we don't know what it is. That seems to literally be the explicit definition, just empirically as we understand it, of mechanical matter, and that's it. It literally only reason we know it exists is because of its gravitational effects. It has no other intrinsic, physics level understanding that we have as of yet.
Right.
So I thought that's really interesting that it's even does not interact with light. So it has to only have the property of mass and gravity.
I'm not sure yet how to evaluate his dark matter claim, other than to interpret it at its most abstract level of like the limit, like the light reaches the planet, and so the matter reflects the light, and you can see the planet, which is heavy or dark matter. However that's put. I'm probably going to get in trouble for putting those two things in the same sentence next to each
Hmm.
other. um,
Well,
but
yeah.
but that's what I was kind of like thinking, was that if light encounters if light
Where's
encounters dark matter, and I'm trying to see where he had it here.
there it is.
Um,
Kind of like it,
that's just like matter that doesn't radiate, but it reflects.
right? So it's matter that's there. It
Yeah,
just doesn't generate light, so it does
just
exist, but
yeah.
it does reflect it, which is again that's some form of interaction with light in itself too, though.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
saying that, it doesn't say anything about the composition of the dark matter, other than that it doesn't generate the light, but it can reflect it. That's it.
Yeah,
It's a very abstract conception of matter at that level.
because it is being for other in that sense.
Yeah. And its being for other reflects the being for other of
Yeah,
light, actually.
right.
Wow. Holy God, that's a whole thing.
Yeah,
All right.
that's 278. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. See that? That's why we do this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, woo.
And of course, we talked. What was it? I mean, I'm not sure how well at this point I highlighted this section when we're talking about the ether. Is that in this?
Hmm.
I mean, he's talking about 500 years. So it reminds me of that of the ether. Proceeds 500 years or more after the actual occurrence that light travels has to
Yeah.
take. In this one, you can see the other hand, empirical phenomena, the propagation of light, carried over from a sphere where they obtain into another sphere where they have no significance. Which that's just sort of. I'm still trying to struggle what that meant, but at first led to me like that's kind of what the ether is, wasn't it? It was a conception of sound propagation, and then trying to apply that to light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it runs into problems, of course.
Yeah,
I always thought of the ether as like a water light, which, if you think about atmosphere, that's actually exactly what it is in some sense.
Yeah.
right.
In fact, there are water, basically water light, or basically just water atmospheres. I mean, then again, that's an ocean. But
Mm,
I mean,
I
if you
mean,
look at we're so used to thinking of things from the ground, but if you look at the Earth from a galactic point of view, the atmosphere of Earth graduating to the water level in the oceans would probably be no different than you would find at certain levels on like gas giants. If a gas giant had, I mean, a gas giant has multiple gas levels, and some of them are liquid. Okay,
yeah.
so all it really is a gas and then a liquid
But if
layer,
you
and then you
want to
get to the solid layer.
if you want to abstract out, there's air and gas and water are fluids, but
Yeah. Oh
it's
yeah.
just one's compressible, one's not.
Yeah. And
I mean, water
it
technically is compressible.
I think Hoolgate highlights Hegel's I think Hoolgate sort of highlights this idea, which I really like, that when you're looking at these logical natural categories, you really what you see as observable phenomena in nature, and phenomena that relate to themselves and to each other, right? Um, I'm I'm still kind of parsing this, because when he says in the philosophy of nature, light can be understood as an observable phenomenon that exhibits, and then he says what it exhibits, right? Um, logical, es- logical essential categories like identity, difference, so on and so forth. Um, and so I don't know. It starts to become clear to me why the philosophy of nature is very much an externally connected set of um, phenomena. I mean, what am I trying to get at here? When he says observable phenomenon, I think the immediate thing that you see. Okay. We know that there are things behind the immediate thing you see. But when you're building a philosophy of nature, how deep can you really go to account for everything? You know what I mean?
Right.
Because he makes the differentiation, and
Yeah.
he says right here, science is an empirical discipline, and not everything about it can be determined logically from first principles, basically. I don't know.
I'm trying to understand those. Like, if you're like, I forget, is it Maxwell? I can't remember who's devil or like the thing that can recognize the mechanical direction of everything in the universe from the start and is able to accurately predict, the way the physics would handle it. Does that still, is that basically still saying that even knowing that you can't predict everything because there's still things you aren't seeing in that? Because I
Well,
guess it is mechanical, so you're not
so
getting, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
plus.
From
Laplace demon, yeah.
He had the idea that if we knew the positions and positions and velocities of every particle in the universe, we could predict the entire history of the universe from beginning to end or whatever.
yeah.
And
Now, what that's basically saying, um, I think what the claim is getting at uh, is that everything that we think of as contingent um, is not actually contingent. But I think I think what Hegel is trying to get at is from the point of view of spirit, of us. Nature is external and contingent until it's brought under reason. And he makes the claim that all of nature is innately populated by reason, but not explicitly, right? It takes
Right.
us
So it is.
mixing, it takes us ordering nature in order to bring reason to nature explicitly.
It's us as finite beings who only see what we can see and concept what we concept to understand this, and so much happens we just don't have the capability of keeping track of.
Well, we do have the capability to order nature by reason and by our
Right.
highest form
I
of
mean,
reason.
it's a continuous process because there's always something that happens that we're not aware of.
Yes.
And
Oh, yes. And even if there are laws that we derive from our empirical study, they can always be knocked down by an example that falls outside the law. And that happens all the time in astronomy. We find an object that does not fall within the laws of physics, and we have to figure out why the appearance appears to break the law of physics and try to reintegrate it into what we understand. And if we can't, it'll break the whole theory and we'll have to start over or something. The distances of the galaxies, I think, is a big one. Like, if you can see galaxies that are fully formed and or look aged all the way back to the Big Bang, there's a big problem with your Big Bang theory that that's when the universe was young and there couldn't possibly have been galaxies.
yeah, and
You know
I
what I mean?
kind of had that. I think they've solved that. It was just something in the calibrate in their calculations misidentified how far it was
Yeah.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, the thing. space time, PBS space time was doing something about how they're starting to have higher significance about how the expansion of the universe now we are starting to show enough significance that it, but not full 5 sigma that they want. That there is a change of the expansion rate of the universe in time, and it actually might be slowing down now instead of accelerating. But it's just sort of the map of it is that, yeah, it does change through history.
Yeah.
I have to look at that because that's the opposite of what they were saying before. But they call it, like, I forget, lambda something, and then the lambda is the constant acceleration of the universe.
Cosmological constant, or
Yeah, it's lambda something. I can't remember the actual full term for the rest of it.
My question is, and it's probably a dumb question because, well, here's my question. We are cosmically
Lambda
a
CDM.
blip. In the time scale of our universe, we are an absolute blip. From our point of view, how can we tell what is speeding up and what is slowing down?
Oh,
And that's a real question.
we can see into the past, right? I mean,
Yes.
Hegel even points it out his time. So that's what they're doing. They're going back further. They know how far it is. They know how much redshift it's happening to it. So they're able to calculate the change of the expansion rate from that.
Gotcha.
And I'm thinking the lambda CDM was the actual full term, which is cold dark matter.
Hmm.
And then obviously matter is part of that too. So dark energy, dark matter, and matter.
It almost makes me wonder if dark energy and dark matter is matter left over from before the Big Bang.
I mean, I don't know. Then again, they're technical. I don't know. I always saw the thing of that, especially with kind of time, almost seemed, especially with space at the start of this. It's like it was static, right? All of a sudden, time started with the Big Bang. Kind of right. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of like it was something static from our perspective that kicked it. And time is a directional from that.
That's the thing, though. Can we see before the Big Bang? Can we see anything before the Big Bang?
Nope.
Yeah. So how do we know that it was at full static, or if it was?
Oh, that's a possibility. I mean, it's also that time, maybe some other dimension that uh only we experience, that in that other space is something else entirely, like it has its own time that's different than our direction.
Yeah.
Because the idea of dimension is it may even be just a differential in energies in a particular direction. Especially if you're talking about the holographic principle, because at that point there's a 2D to 3D correspondence, and I think it was something from that. Well, there's an energy differential that's able to combine the two, or to connect the two viewpoints.
Yeah. If you're wondering if I'm trying to make a point, I'm not. I'm just
No,
asking.
we're talking.
Yeah. I'm just asking questions because I'm basically a physics. Um, I wouldn't say a virgin. I mean, like I've been to high school classes. I've, you know, read this or that book, but has any of it really stuck beyond the basics? Not really.
I had to have my 3 semesters of physics for engineers and scientists in college, or 2 actually. Thinking of something else, which of course that's not physics. That's just for simplified, at least for scientists,
Yeah.
but not overly simplified for life sciences. But not even more simplified. I mean, so is it light is the first interpretation of matter? It's interest. It's, yeah. What was it? Again, I think it's interesting that it's sort of the antithesis of matter as we think about it as massive, but it is because it's negation, and then that negation after that is other qualitative matter, right? Oh yeah, something I kept thinking interesting for going through this is how much light does show up later in like color and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh God, there's a in Hegel and Atonism I didn't read. It does go over the different theories of light during Hegel's time specifically. Only that's the whole point of that essay.
Yeah.
I need to go over that.
Nice.
That's like right here. Rays of light is regarded as four-sided. Uh,
Wow. Okay.
Well,
that's a weird. That's a theory based purely on empirical phenomena and trying to explain it, which does have parallels with quantum physics to a certain extent today.
One of the things that comes across well in or in Houlgate's essay is that the terms that Hegel deals with in his era and the terms that we have in our modern 21st century physics, they may share the same name, but what they denote, what they describe, are often completely different. One is very indeterminate from Hegel's era, which is why he, by and large, rejects a lot of them, whereas the ones in our era, we actually, through experimentation, see them moving, doing things, disappearing, appearing, all of those things that are far more determinate than those earlier conjectures. And I like how Houlgate sort of
Which
highlights that.
is kind of right because there's also a quote in here I had kind of highlighted that was kind of the same thing where they had the abstract concept, but it was indeterminate at the time. There's
Yeah.
no more exist particles of light or ether than the nerves consist of series of globules, each receiving an impulse and setting others in motion. Which, from our modern sense, we know that's generally correct, but they were still formulating a theory at the time. So it's pretty,
Is this in the Hegel reading?
yeah, page 94
Okay.
under right before, yeah, yeah, there it is, the bottom of the first paragraph.
Oh yeah, I do remember reading that. You said globules, and I was like, "Yep."
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's right. It's funny because it's he's only rejecting it because it's indeterminate, not because it's entirely incorrect.
Yeah. I I swear to God, Houlgate has got to live another 30 years and do a full treatise on the nature because like his ability to uh summarize a lot of this is really a service, I think. Um we really have to struggle through a lot of this.
Well, we'll just feed it to AI by then.
AI AI is only as smart as what you feed into it.
Correct. Because I remember asking it questions again as of late. Can you summarize this paragraph in Nature? And then it quotes instead of light, it quotes something about biology. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
You
when
have to
I've
guide
had to
it.
use AI, sometimes it will quote Holgate.
Yeah. I think it gave me what is it, paragraph 660 from Philosophy of Nature too once,
Oh yeah.
which there is no 660 at all in the three encyclopedias.
Okay,
Hallucinate.
that's wild.
Yeah, that's one of the problems with AI is that it tends to hallucinate.
I need to put a thing note into it that if it doesn't know the answer to just say as such, and that usually helps get rid of
Yeah,
hallucinations.
Yeah.
I remember I was consulting with an AI on some of Miles' writings, and it gave me bunch of citations for Mile that turned out to be incorrect.
Yeah. Yeah.
It, it looked very plausible, but when I started looking up the citations and saw they were not correct.
Interesting.
I mean, that's a fundamental weakness of AI in its present day form.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to read this out because, because it's what we're going to cover next, but it might also help illuminate what we just went through a little bit. So the bodies of opposition. And actually, that's the perfect title for this, the bodies of opposition. If you oppose light, if you're the, the opposition of light, what are you? You're the reflection of light, negative of light. Darkness, as immediately the negative of light, is the opposition to light's abstractly identical ideality. It is this opposition in its own self. It has material reality and falls apart into a duality, namely corporeal difference, i.e., material being for self, rigidity, opposition as such, which existing independently and uncontrolled by individuality, is merely sunk within itself and is thus a disillusion in neutrality. The former is the lunar, the latter, the cometary body. So I'm thinking right here. So you have light and then you have these bodies of opposition, right? And I'm thinking of the earlier level where they talk about space as this uninterrupted. And if you think of light at this level as the uninterrupted matter, and then you have the matter that interrupts light, what is that? What would the bodies of opposition be in the previous dialectic? You know what I mean?
Yeah, because we're
Well,
mirroring.
would it be time?
Well, this is essence too. Okay, yeah. I'm also taking it all the way back to the logic. We're in the essence, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Because that's where opposition itself shows up in general. So that's what it is. Opposition is opposition. Okay.
yeah, yeah. You're right. Only this is material
Oh yeah,
opposition.
because light is what is it? The inverse is space at a point. So yeah, it's mere extension within the realm of physics. So yeah, time would be the opposite. So in this, yeah, okay. So how would that reference back to itself here? Because it is
Yeah.
reflection at this point.
Yeah, I remember the discussion of how when space reaches a limit, um, and what that looks like. I don't know. I'll just have to read it. I'll just have to go ahead and read on ahead. But it's interesting how he immediately starts talking about comments and moons, basically, at this level. Uh, bodies of opposition, body of individuality, the planet. Okay. And he says the body of individuality is the opposition which has gone back into itself, is the earth or the planet as such. It is the body of the individual totality where rigidity opens up into a separation into real differences, and this resolution is held together by a self-like point of unity.
Oh, there it is. So back into itself.
Yeah. And these are metaphysical categories of nature,
Actual rotation of planets.
where there are stages. Holgate actually talks about this in his
Right.
quick essay. I'm just trying to remember where he said it real quick. Stages. Yeah. Hegel, okay. Although nature can be made intelligible in quantitative terms as at the microscopic level, Hegel shows that at the macroscopic level, it comprises stages that are logically and in that sense qualitatively distinct, stages that should not be reduced to one another or to a single univocal way of being, or indeed to mere effects of microscopic quantum activity. Whether quantum physicists, yeah, and yeah, he just makes his little speculation at the end. Stages.
Where's that from again, Holgate?
Ah, sorry, hang on.
Yeah, okay.
There we
There
go.
it is.
Yeah. Ooh,
Yeah,
interesting.
that's kind of like the conception as I'm reading through that. It's like the conception again of like emergent properties, but from a Hegelian version of that, which is like chemism and stuff, where something builds out of a thing underneath it that cannot be, it's in nature, but it can't be, simplified to the parts, like in temperature.
Yeah.
Temperature, you can individualize any individual air molecule and get temperature. So
And
this is kind
remember,
of how I feel the stages logically work.
this is conceptual.
Right.
And conceptual does
Oh, he
not.
says it right there. Stages that should not be reduced to one another or to a single in a vehicle way of being. Okay. That is literally what I said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you cannot say, gosh, for Holgate to try to get the full physics understanding of light, that's an arduous task. At them being so that takes years probably.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I like how he says that particular natural, I guess, macroscopic stages cannot be uh, uh, merely effects of microscopic quantum activity. You could almost say that, like the superhero, the MCU sort of portrays the quantum universe as affecting the macro universe. In ways that we cannot see. And the actual truth is that what we can see in the macroverse right now is conditioned by the quantum level, right? You
Right.
can't you can't separate them, in terms of like mere cause and effect of the understanding. Like that's to turn it into a mechanical machine, rather than the same thing that they are, if I
It's
can put it that way.
kind of like the stage of the higher level. It's what it rests upon its foundation, but it's not. But then it still does things on the stage, but it's not the stage. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
physicist David Bohm was very much concerned with those kind of issues, and he was very much influenced by Frederick Engel's writings on nature, and Hegel as well. He was familiar with Hegel too.
Yeah.
Not many. As far as I can tell, there have been very few physicists who really were familiar with Hegel, but he was one. He was one of the few.
Yeah. The problem is, as I see it, is that Marx and Engels should have lived another 100 years because, well, if you read the dialectics of nature, you get that it is sort of a sketch
Yeah,
based on a lot of empirical knowledge being processed by Engels and Marx and others into, the dialectic theoretical construct. And if they just had the time to develop, you know, another 100 years to develop it all and footnote it, we'd be a lot closer, you know. would be a lot closer to a better understanding of the universe, I think, or at least, you know, I don't know.
Well, philosopher Hillary Putnam used to call Engels the most learned man of the 19th century.
I don't know if they I don't know if they saved the contents of his library or at least saved a list of it. I'm hoping they did because I'd love to get a hold of that list, especially the scientific
Yeah.
stuff. That would make for fascinating reading. Um, have either of you heard of I haven't read it all. I've only read bits and pieces, but um uh JD Bernal,
Yeah.
he wrote on um scientific history, and he might be worth looking up. I think you can find his like 4 volume box set on Abe used books. Um, and he's one of those who I guess read Ingalls as well as others, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping anyway,
Thing about Bernal, he never won the Nobel Prize, but several of his students did. Because
yeah.
his problem was he was interested in many different things, and
He was a generalist.
that doesn't get you the Nobel Prize usually.
No, it doesn't. We need more generalists like Bernal though to produce good students who do uh, win prizes, and they're too few and far between. And for our listening audience, that's one of the reasons why we study Hegel, is because Hegel goes a long way toward making you into a generalist, into someone who looks at the whole and sees the dialectic of the whole and the parts, as we've already talked about in the logic. Um, we got 10 minutes to go. Did either of you have any further thoughts on light or the philosophy of nature up to now?
Uh,
Yeah, I'm getting tired too, Cal.
I've had a figured out one of my recent health issues, and now I'm just tired because I'm still recuperating. Low magnesium does a lot. Could you?
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I think it's a medical thing, but I'm supplementing, so it's helping a lot.
Good.
Yeah,
Awesome.
some medicine's doing it. I don't know. Any features? Oh, I think the thing that was kind of novel to me was going back through the area on the reflection of light as the
Hmm.
reflection of nature, which is literal. First thing we think of as reflection.
Hmm.
Um, it's just kind of also, I guess, the mocking thing he did when we get to the section of the mirror, because it's A is reflecting B is reflecting A, but not just A is reflecting B, but it's reflecting itself through B, and then B, and what was it? Any attempt to explain this mechanically results only in the wildest confusion, because you keep having these infinities, and you do it that way. They have each continue to represent the same thing, but so that each repeated image exists separately, much like can also be concentrated by a mirror on one point. Yeah, parabolic mirror.
Hmm. Where is that?
Uh, 98.
Sorry.
That's all right. There's good you way to.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. I don't think I got I don't think I got to the very, very end. It's very interesting. Okay, so if we call the two mirrors A and B and ask what is visible in A, the answer is B, but B is A's. Whoa. Okay, my brain is breaking. But B is A's visibility in B, so that what is visible in A is A as visible in B. Now, what is visible in B? A itself and A as visible in B. What more is visible in A? B and that which is visible in B, i.e., A itself and A is visible in B, and so on. Thus, we have the continual repetition of the same thing, and so that each repeated image exists separately. Much light can also be concentrated by a mirror on one point. And it doesn't hurt that light being the self-identical, the abstract self-identical, or whatever he called it, what's visible between these two doesn't really change, does it? It's just reflected light, right?
Also, just trying to remember, like, why does light bend? And it's because as it hits a transition point of the glass, it actually slows down, which causes it to effectively curve
Mm, yeah.
because of differential speed as it starts moving in. But that still seems like just definition of light at that point, anyways, and it's material. Can you just talk about optics? Actually, I guess it is relevant later.
Yeah, he mentions the optics at a certain point in
Which
here.
optics at this time wasn't still well, I guess, established in terms of why it worked.
Yeah.
Compared to today, because they didn't have an understanding of light.
Yeah, basically, it talked about what we call geometric optics.
Correct. It just there's a what I just explained, the change of speed is what necessitates the quintessential geometric version of light that they use.
His description here of the A and the B right after is so interesting. He says, light is the active identity which posits everything is identical. As this identity, however, it is still wholly abstract. Things are not yet really identical, but are for an other, positing their identity with the other in the other. This positing of things as identical is thus for the things themselves something external. Their being illumined is for them a matter of indifference, but it is necessary that things should be posited in their own proper character as concretely identical. Light must become the thing's own light, must fulfill and realize itself. So light as selfhood is still wholly abstract, and because it's abstract, its selfhood is easily transferred, I guess, in its reflection.
So the pre-identity which self devoid of any inner.
The other with which light stands in relation is external to light, just as the understanding has its material external to it. This negative we have at first only called darkness, but it also has an eminent determinative character of its own. It is this physical opposition in its abstract determination, and so still enjoying independent being, which we now have to consider. So basically, light travels from the star, it hits objects.
Yeah, I got the light itself part. That's just literally it. In light, in comparison to itself, is indistinguishable from itself. And that's
right.
It.
Yeah, that's it. And when it starts to interact with things like these other than itself, the bodies of opposition, where things change. In other words, light becomes a being for other, I guess you could say. Yeah. And then he goes through the stages, which are metaphysical stages, I guess you could say. Like, if you look at the lunar or the commentary, there are aspects of the lunar and the commentary that could also apply to the planetary, but the planetary is capable of more. God, that's a really bad way to put it. Sorry. I just have to read the damn thing is what it comes down to. All right. So we should read Bodies of Opposition. I'm just wondering how far that is. So hang on. So Bodies of Opposition starts on 99, and then we get to the planetary.
Which is where do the elements start?
103.
Yeah.
I mean, that's only like 4 or 5 pages. How long is the planetary? Is the planetary very long? Oh, you know what? You're right. Let's read up to the elements on page 105. That's perfect. So from the Bodies of Opposition on page, what was it, 99?
Yes.
And then we'll go up to 105, the elements. The elements is probably a long section. We've got air. Whoa. Elements of opposition. The individual element process of elements. Yeah, what do you think, Kyle? Do you think 105 is far enough, or should we go farther?
I think that's far enough for now.
All right. I'll try to find. Well, you do some background reading on Hegel and Newton. I'd be interested to hear about some of those theories of light in Hegel's time. If God, that's quite an education in and of itself, you know.
Yeah.
All right, comrades. I hope you have a good night. If you have any issues come up or just want to discuss whatever, get on the DM and hold forth.
Thanks, comrades.
Have a good night, comrades.
Good night.